Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters and friends, and welcome to the episode, The Islamic Response to the Problem and Evil and Suffering. What is the problem of evil and suffering in the first place? You've probably heard this before, emanating from the mouths of the skeptics and the atheists and the doubters and people who are just genuinely concerned with theology, philosophy, thinking, religion, and similar subjects. And to summarize, the problem of evil and suffering is that it is unbelievable that a good, all-powerful, loving creator exists with all of the suffering and evil that's in the world. Personal evil, natural evil and suffering, tsunamis, earthquakes, we have wars, all of this chaos and calamity in the world. You have, according to UNICEF, 22,000 human beings, most of them children under the age of 5, dying every day because of starvation, no food. Why? How? Is our Lord an absentee landlord? What does it say about him? This is exactly the narrative that you hear from atheists and skeptics, brothers and sisters and friends. And you've had this from the philosophical Western tradition. You had David Hume, for example. He said the following: Epicurus's old questions are yet unanswered. Is he willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is impotent. Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Whence then is evil? Why is the evil in the first place? Because essentially what David Hume was trying to say to us, brothers and sisters and friends, was that if God is powerful and willing to stop the evil, because not only is he powerful but good and loving, then why is the evil in the first place? It might mean that he's not powerful, or it might mean that he's not willing to stop the evil. Maybe he is not loving and merciful and good. But if he's both loving and merciful and good and powerful, then why is the evil in the first place? Now, some people think this is a very powerful argument, but let's give it to them. Let's say, you know what? Congratulations. It's an amazing argument. You have defeated thousands of years of theology. God is now dead, as Nietzsche said. But I don't really mean this, but let's just give it to them for a moment. And if we do give them this argument and say it's fantastic, then they still have to believe in God. That's the irony. Why? Because the problem of evil argument is what you would call a probabilistic argument. It is based upon probability. It's not a deductive argument. It doesn't necessarily follow that since there's evil and suffering in the world, that there can't be any God that is good and loving and merciful. It doesn't necessarily follow. It's not deductive. It's more inductive, based upon our own experiences and our limited ideas and perceptions about man, life, the world, and the universe, right? So it's probabilistic in nature. It's a probabilistic argument. So if the conclusion is there is no loving good God based on probability, because the problem of evil argument, as we've just said, is a probabilistic argument, then they have to be consistent. They can't have their cake and eat it. They have to use the same methodology, probability, and apply it to other things. And if they do, they have to believe in a designer for the universe. Because it's highly likely that there is a designer, probability, based upon the apparent fine-tuning of the constants and the physical laws in the universe. So where they reject God with one argument using probability, they have to accept him with another argument using probability. If they're not consistent, then it shows that there's an agenda here, or they're being intellectually dishonest. So the one who rejects God based on probability will have to accept him on probability too. So this is why, brothers and sisters and friends, the problem of evil argument fails based on its method of thinking, probability. But let's give you a logical summary of the problem of evil argument, and then we could discuss it from an Islamic perspective. Here is the logical summary. Number one, a good, loving, merciful, omnipotent, which means all-powerful God exists. Number two, evil and suffering exists. Number three, therefore a good, merciful, loving, all-powerful God doesn't exist. Now, as we said, the conclusion doesn't necessarily follow. It's a probabilistic argument. It's not a deductive one, which means that the conclusion necessarily follows. There's no necessity in the conclusion here. And the way to break this argument is to expose some daring assumptions, brothers and sisters and friends. And there are three daring assumptions. Daring assumption number one is that they assume Allah or God is only or just good and all-powerful. Number two, they assume, brothers and sisters and friends, that Allah hasn't given us, or God hasn't given us, any good reasons to permit evil and suffering in the first place. And number three, it assumes, brothers and sisters and friends, that evil and suffering is objective. These are the three daring assumptions. And believe me, they're quite daring. And if we can expose these three daring assumptions and break them down, then what happens is that the whole argument falls on its face. So let's go to the first daring assumption. Is God only good and only powerful? Is he just good and just powerful? Well, first and foremost, this is a misrepresentation of Islam. It's a straw man fallacy. It's a logical fallacy that builds a straw man. It could easily break down. You misrepresent Allah. We believe Allah is not only good and all powerful. We believe Allah is Al-Hakim. He is the wise. He is Al-Khaliq. He is the creator. He is Al-Latif. He is the subtle with the believers. He is Al-Mu'min, the source of Iman. He is Al-Wali. He is the governor, the protector. He is Al-Wudud, the excessively loving. He is Ar-Rahman, the intensely merciful. He is Ar-Rahim. Do you see the point here? They're misrepresenting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They start off on the wrong ground. What God are you arguing against? It certainly isn't our God, because Allah is not only good and all powerful, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also Al-Hakim, the wise. And if He is Al-Hakim, it means that when things happen in the universe as a result of Allah's will, and we know Allah's will doesn't contradict His nature, then therefore there's wisdom behind the things that happen in the universe. And if there's wisdom, it means there's reasons. And therefore it breaks down the first daring assumption. But some people may argue, 1 minute, they'll be scratching their head. I actually do want to scratch my head, but it matches to what I'm saying now, but forget that. They're scratching their head and they're saying, wait a minute. What wisdom? I don't see the wisdom in my baby having cancer. I don't see the wisdom in World War I and World War II. I don't see the wisdom in the genocide of the Jews. I don't see the wisdom in all this evil and suffering. There is no wisdom. How can you ever say that to even suggest there's wisdom? You're evil. Let's roll back with the emotions slightly, calm down, take a chill pill, have some chamomile tea, and relax. Just because you can't see the wisdom in something, it doesn't mean it's not there. This is another logical fallacy called Argumentum Ad Ignorantiam. You're arguing from your own ignorance. It is the kind of approach or the intellectual capacity of a toddler. Imagine, for example, a toddler, say my son, he walks to the table and he sees an amazing glass full of this brown, golden type liquid. And he runs to take the glass and wants to drink it. And out of my love for him, I take his hand and I move it out of the way. I say, no, no tea. And my son starts crying. And he believes I'm evil. He believes I've caused him suffering. That's because he hasn't accessed my wisdom, which is, it's full of vinegar. But my son didn't know this. And really, it's as simple as that. Allah knows. We don't. Allah has the picture. We just have the pixel. He has the totality of knowledge. We have its particulars. And that's how the argument falls on its face. Because God is not only good and all powerful, He's also Al-Hakim, He is the wise. And His wisdom transcends our wisdom. And even if we can't access His wisdom, it doesn't mean it's not there. I want us to ponder on chapter 18, verses 65 onwards, and chapter 2, verse 30. And it would really highlight the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and really break down this daring assumption that God or Allah is only good and all powerful. So let me just repeat what these daring assumptions are. Number one, that God is only good, just good and all powerful. Daring assumption number two, that Allah or God has not given us any good reasons to why He's permitted evil and suffering in the first place. And the daring assumption number three is that evil is actually objective. So we were talking about the first daring assumption, and we showed that Allah is not only good and all powerful, He's also the just, Al-Hakim. And if He is the wise, then what happens in the universe is in line with His wisdom. Now, if we can't see the wisdom, we can't argue from ignorance and fall for that logical fallacy. And what I want to do is now discuss the Quran in chapter 18 and Surah Baqarah in relevant verses to really highlight this fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Hakim, and there are wisdoms behind these things.